Do you find yourself struggling with UX research analysis? If that's the case, this video is for you. I'm Ash Montes and I work as a UX researcher, and in this video I'll walk you through a step-by-step process I take to turn data into insights. I'll also point out a few common traps during analysis. Let's start with what were you hoping to learn? Sometimes we jump right in, and that's one of the traps, going on a road trip with no map or GPS. So really the first step is to revisit the research questions, what we were hoping to learn. This will set the approach to take with the analysis. In UX research, when people talk about analysis, they're usually referring to qualitative analysis. This means analysis of interviews or usability testing. So this is what we'll focus on today. Another thing to point out is that the process of analysis would have different steps depending on the tool you're using. It's pretty common for researchers to use a collaboration tool like Mural or Miro, since it's the same we use for note-taking, and they also have the tag option in. Why is this important? Let me show you. Here is one example of usability testing on meal kit delivery, and we have all these post-its with comments collected. What I would do here is to tag what is relevant. This is called coding. The name is unfortunate because we immediately think of developers. In the UX research context, coding relates to creating tags and tagging post-its or sections of a transcript. So codes are how we label and organize the raw data to start uncovering those key themes. Since we're on the topic of codes and tags, it's worth pointing out that if you have specific assumptions that you wanted to learn more about, this is what is known as a deductive approach, and you may have already some tags or categories predetermined to help you focus on what is key for that research piece. Or if you're exploring a new or unfamiliar area with limited existing research, that is what we call inductive approach, where you jump into the data and then you develop the tags as you review that data. From my experience, what we usually do is a bit of a mix between the two. The good thing about this way of organizing the post-its is that it's very easy to keep track of your thinking. Why did you come to certain conclusions? And it's also easier to get others to join in and help. Okay, so have you added tags to the post-its? Now it's about grouping them together according to patterns and connections that you notice, and you can use the tags as a guide. Before we move forward, is this the only way to run analysis? For a more in-depth approach, you can consider specialized software, tools like Condense or Dovetail. They are designed specifically for qualitative data analysis, and they have features that can make the process more efficient. The problem is these specialized tools come with a cost. If you're looking for free alternatives, you could try an open source option like Taget. I haven't used it myself, but I know it has the tag function. Some researchers even use tools like Excel or Word, but you have to keep in mind that those are not really tailored for qualitative analysis, so you might face some limitations there. If you have the advantage of using a proper research tool, they can help if you decide to use transcripts. Be aware that with the transcript, there's a lot of text, a lot of data. So how can you filter the signal from the noise? What you're on the lookout for is anything that feels significant, surprising, or that it directly relates to those research questions. Obviously, things are repeated. You're keeping track of that as well. Anything that reveals strong emotions. So if someone is upset, frustrated, just bear in mind that when people describe their frustrations, what they're describing may be the symptom of something else. A little bit like complaining about mold on the floor when actually the problem is the leak on the roof. So we spoke of repetition, we spoke of strong emotions. Another thing that we pay attention to is the unexpected. and that could lead to some breakthroughs. Once you find these statements or sections, you can highlight them. And one thing that I've noticed is that people who are starting out, they usually think that's the work. All they have to do is find those statements, highlight those statements, and share that with the team. I understand that that happens because there's pressure to deliver results. This is a way to speed the process. But as you do that, what happens is you end up leaving a lot of data on the table. Imagine you've heard one person say, "Oh, the button feels too small." That could feel like the quote that you need to explain what the issue is. But maybe that's not the problem, or maybe it's not the totality of the problem. So if you focus on that one single quote about the size of the button, that could trap the team into coming up with a very narrow solution, and you ignore the fact that the button is too far away from where the user is looking. A good metaphor here is to imagine that we're putting a puzzle together. So quotes are all these individual pieces. They're colorful, interesting. They could even represent a section of the puzzle, but still the value comes from connecting this little piece with the other pieces, because that's when you get to notice different patterns. And at one point, you can step back and you understand the big picture. Okay, so we spoke of this trap of hunting for quotes, but if you're not just hunting for quotes, what else can you do? We are creating tags and then tagging statements or sections of the transcript, just like we did with the post-its. Here I have this transcript of what was said during the interview, and I'm using a proper tool that allows for the coding. I'm not doing a review of the tool here, but if this is something you're interested in, let me know in the comments. As we focus on the tagging or coding, I'd say you can code with precision and label individual lines or short phrases, basically splitting everything, or you can code broad chunks of text under one overarching label. Each has its pros and cons, but lumping tends to be faster, and it's a good starting point for most people, and you can refine these tags and keep going back to them. When we start coding, everything tends to be very close to what is actually said. So you can see some examples here. I'm on Miro and I'm adding the tag price to the post-it, which is also the word you see on the post-it. The key thing to say is there's flexibility in the process, so don't be afraid to change tags, split those tags, or merge them together as you get a better sense of what's being collected. So all of this coding is the zooming in part. It's the analysis, which is breaking things apart and looking at all these little details. Once that's done, we start with the zooming out, which is combining things together. This is the synthesis part. How do we do this? If we're using a specialized tool, it's all the press of a button. Here you can see it automatically clusters these sections according to their tags. Even with a tool like Miro, today it allows to group post-its with a single click. Of course, you can still do this manually. When this is done, you can just spend some time reading through the post-its and trying to find a statement or word that summarizes what that cluster means. What do you think the main takeaway here is? Just pointing out that you can have these clusters according to a single tag, or you can try to have broad categories or buckets and then define the insights from those categories so you're not constrained by the tags. Do you see what I mean here? This one theme is based on a single tag, while this example here is a theme that came from post-its with different tags. Since we're on the topic of themes, how do we come up with these themes? You can look for repetition across participants, any metaphors that capture a concept in its essence. You can look for causal connections. If you hear a lot of because X, then W. Pay attention to contradictions as well, tensions between elements, or anything that is unresolved or leads to open questions. These are all the things that you're paying attention to as you're formulating these themes. One thing that I wanted to make clear is that crafting these themes is an act of active interpretation, so it's a bit misleading when we say the themes will emerge from the data. It makes it sound like it's all coming from the data, but in reality, this comes from our understanding of the things that we're exposed to. As we're going through this theming, we're looking at the semantic meaning and we're looking at the latent meaning. We're trying to cover both sides. And there are two traps here. One, we might start to over-interpret or read too much into what the participant is saying. We need to be careful not to project our own biases. On the flip side, there's also a risk of being too literal and missing important underlying themes. On the subject, I want to highlight this example where you're analyzing interviews on weight loss, and 9 out of 10 people talk about discipline, exercise, diet, and only 1 mentions that they also are taking Ozempic. It could be tempting to conclude that the real reason behind weight loss is diet, exercise, everything that we've heard. But sometimes the most important fact will be the hardest to admit out loud. So when we notice these contradictions, these outliers, this could lead us to a different methodology, a different approach to get more data to complement our initial findings. Another trap is doing all the work by yourself, because the only person who gets to see and interpret the data is you. What can you do to counter that trap? You can ask people to help refine some of the tags you created, or maybe getting the team involved in the theming part, which is when you have all the tags nice and tidy and you're just grouping them together. It's a funny one that people are wary of analysis because it takes some time. The amount of time that you take with analysis really depends on the research setup that you're working with. If you have the time, you can go more in depth. If not, my recommendation is to stick with these collaborative tools using the note-taking by the team. So, okay, let's recap. To make this easy, let's talk about these 5 steps that we should take. The first is revisit the research questions so you know how you're going to approach the analysis. Then tag or code any statements. This can be done with transcripts or post-it notes. Then the next step is to get more familiar with the transcript. Try to group all these quotes, looking for patterns and connections through affinity mapping. You develop the themes, which are the big ideas that come from the data. You're going beyond descriptions or categories. You're looking for contradictions, deeper meanings, and actionable insights. We haven't spoken about how AI can help at this point. I'll leave this for the next video. It's all about AI and UX research. Also, I'll mention here I've been very busy in the last few months. I'm still excited to make more videos. I just need to find the time. I want to make sure it's good quality. These videos are worth the effort. I hope the next one won't take as long as this one. And that's it. I'll see you around.